So first of all, I'm going to start by just going through and letting you know that all the documents that we're going to share, plus this recording, plus these slides, will be on the faculty promotion and tenure. So this is that actual web page, and you'll see if we go to promotion, it says Cole's promotion tenure calendar. If you go down just a little bit, you'll see AgriLife Research Extension and Service promotion calendar. These two calendars, as far as when submissions occur, are parallel with each other. So you'll see as you open that up, there are highlighted areas, and that is the drop dead dates for things to be uploaded for both midterms. And then where department heads, they need to upload things for the peer review committee, which we'll talk through. And then when things have to go to the associate director's level on the midterm. And then there's also the same type of information when we actually go to the promotion process. And again, the dates that you see here for submission, not necessarily what happens between submissions at different levels will be the same, but the actual dates of submission will be the same for both the college and AgriLife Research and AgriLife Extension. All right, so let's go back to the slides. So just know that everything we talk about will be in that location. So get that. All right, so Sandy, I'll let you take it from here and get us started on why we're doing this and where we're headed.
Thank you very much, Dan, for that lead in and explanation. And I just want to reinforce what Dan said, that we are both available anytime to answer questions and help. And this is just a real quick background. I know most of you know all of this, but Texas A&M AgriLife is a very large entity composed of a number of different areas, including research, the extension service, the forest service, the veterinary medical diagnostic lab, and a new addition due to reorganization at the university is we now oversee the School of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. So we've grown because of some of the changes. And again, the reason we're modifying the promotion process is also due to changes at the university and requirements that way. So that's the impetus for coming up with this new process that we have. And I'm just going to start off. You can go to the next slide. Again, I know Dr. Lamb recently was talking about AgriLife Research and Extension. You know, research was 400 PhD level scientists. Well, now with the veterinary medicine and biomedical sciences additions, we're now over 600 PhD level scientists in the AgriLife research system. And these are people that are located on campus or one of the 13 centers or research stations around the state. This is just a slide from, I went to a chief research officer meeting in Corpus Christi earlier this week and realized when we have about $158 million in external grants that were awarded in fiscal year 22, that's quite impressive when we think about everything that Texas A&M AgriLife Research and Extension cover. I won't spend more time on this slide. This is just sort of background. Dan, you want to talk about Extension a little more?
Yeah, you know, if you think about the two agencies, we cover a lot of ground and make huge impacts. And I think I want to agree, I think Sandy and I would both agree, I know we would, that our goal is to help people be successful in their jobs. And part of that is successful promotion and going through the career ladder. And so we are trying our hardest to make sure that we do things in a fair way, but at the same time that will help set up people to be successful in their careers and going forward, because they are a valued part of our system and then within each of these agencies. So our agenda today is, just so you know, we're going to talk about the importance of position descriptions, mentoring committees. We'll talk about promotion processes for extension and for joint appointments. We'll talk about what goes into, at least that's a high level, a candidate's dossier and the impact statements. We'll talk about the program support chart that's part of this and other corollary maybe documents that will help the candidate put together their packet or their dossier that will go forward. We'll be talking about external review letters. We'll be talking about the makeup of the committee for promotion, the peer review committee. We'll talk about extension-specific guidelines as well as research extension guidelines. And at the end, we'll talk about extension and/or research faculty that have official teaching responsibilities, and then we'll have time for questions. And we'll stay on even past our hour as long as, like we did last time, as long as we have questions. So I think, I'll let Sandy again pick this up again, talking about promotion, the importance of the position description.
All right. So one of the goals with the changes that are being implemented basically is we want this to be a very fair and equitable evaluation of the accomplishments of each of the candidates going up for promotion, and realize that each of you represents a major commitment by AgriLife Research and Extension to the Texas A&M AgriLife system, basically. And so we want you to be successful. But one of the things that we really want to re-emphasize is your position description. Now, every year when you meet with your department head, center director, or unit leader, one of the things that hopefully is being described and discussed is what your official duties are and obligations are. And so that's the position description, and that's going to be the baseline document used by the peer review committee members and external reviewers and supervisors to evaluate your accomplishments and your impacts. So hopefully every year as you talk with your supervisor and during your annual review, you discuss the position description. And we want this to be basically an accurate reflection of all of the things that you do that basically promote the mission of AgriLife. And so we're very, very important that this is here. This is what all the peer review people will be looking at as they evaluate your accomplishments. So it's important that it be accurate. It needs to be current, accurate, and reflect your duties and responsibilities. And again, the annual performance evaluation with your supervisor is the perfect time to make sure this is up to date. So,
yep.
Then any questions on the position description? I'll just. Okay, so we believe, Dan and I believe very strongly in a mentoring committee. When you come in and you're either a new faculty member or even a seasoned faculty member going up for promotion to full, it's really nice to have a cluster of people that you can talk to about anything you want to. And so your mentoring committee, we know for new faculty, is critically important for providing guidance. But again, I think having gone through the assistant to associate to full pathway, there's always people that you sort of rely on for input and feedback. And so you can see that mentoring committee members have certain responsibilities. They're there to assist the candidate in developing their dossier for their midterm review, and we'll describe this below, and for promotion. And they assist the candidate in developing a list of potential external reviewers. And this is something that I have to emphasize, you don't really want to put off to the last minute. It's always nice to have a list of potential external reviewers, and you may have those, and your mentoring committee can help you with developing those as well. And again, the way that works is we'll talk about this more later, but these need to be arm's length external reviewers that understand the field, understand what you're doing, all the different contributions you made. The mentoring committee usually has a chair, and ideally, if you're an extension faculty member, major AdLoc, then it would be an extension faculty member. And if you're a research faculty, hopefully it would be a research faculty member who would be the chair of the mentoring committee. Faculty on a mentoring committee should have a rank higher than the mentee. The members can consist of faculty members from other departments, centers, or units as deemed appropriate. They can be tenured or tenure track faculty. They can be non-tenured. What this is this is a group that's there to assist you as you get your everything assembled so that you have a successful outcome. Okay, and again, the faculty members' performance recommendations are going to be presented to the supervisors annually by the mentoring committee. That's a recommendation until you move up to the rank of associate professor. And again, if you're already an associate professor and you want to move up I strongly encourage that you have mentors that you talk to continually, because they can really help out. All right, so Dan, thank you for moving us along. So what we tried to do was come up with a overall schematic of the way the process works. And if you want to hit the next slide, basically as the candidate, what's in that oval is what you are really focused on. And I need to emphasize that we are not changing any of the process that occurs at the department or center level. So we're not changing any of the expectations. We're not changing any of the duties, responsibilities, obligations at that point. We are only changing the process once the dossier is submitted to Interfolio. So as a candidate, what's inside that oval is what you need to be focused on. Everything else is going to happen behind the scenes, but we want you to understand the way the new process is going to work. So this is, for example, if you're 100% AgriLife research pathway for promotion. As you can see in the blue are the dates. This matches what you'll see if you go to the website as the dates when things are due for midterms. And then the green is for actual promotion process. So you can see the midterms due May 19th. Promotion is due September 22nd. And the big difference between the midterm and the promotion is no external reviewers are required for the midterm review. They're only required for the promotion. So that's why the dates moved up, so that the midterms can be evaluated before the committees then have to look at the actual promotion documents. So again, when the dossier comes in, it still goes to the department. The department has someone who will upload it into Interfolio. And then that will then go for 100% AgriLife research faculty member. It will go to an AgriLife Research Peer Review Committee, which also is chaired by a non-voting chair. That committee will evaluate the dossier, look at your impacts, things like that. They will write a recommendation. That recommendation will go up to the department head, the center director, or the unit leader as appropriate. So and the reason we want to do this is because in the case, I'll use the case of a department head. As a former department head, I know what every single person in my department does for the success of the mission of the department. That is my job, or was my job as department head, is to make those comments and evaluate that. The center director or the unit leader knows everything that a faculty member does to promote the success of their center or their unit. And so what we're hoping is that this will give a very balanced review of all the contributions that you make as a researcher to your department and to your center or where you happen to be located. Does that make some sense? Okay, and then they will meet as necessary, and they will write a recommendation of the appropriateness for promotion. That will then go to the associate director, who in this case is going to be myself. I will review all the materials, and I will write my recommendation that then goes up to the director, in this case, Dr. Cliff Lamb, for research, who will make the final decision as to promotion. And so that's how it works for research. Dan, the next one is basically for extension.
There we go. All right, so 100% extension, same thing. You'll notice almost the same materials are uploaded in Interfolio. So both the external review letters, the promotion or the position description would be uploaded as well as the candidate's dossier, which we're going to talk more about what goes into that in a minute, CV plus impact statements. The mentoring committee, of course, is very important in evaluating that, to making sure it looks good as before it gets into Interfolio. And then by the date of submission, it would be uploaded into Interfolio. It would go to the extension peer review committee to be evaluated. Again, non-voting chair that would be running that committee. They would make an evaluation, and then ultimately, based off of the external letters, the candidate's dossier, the position description, and make a recommendation to, in this case, the department head, and the associate department head would both receive that information. The department head would write a letter, give that as to the extensions of that person's extension responsibilities and make an evaluation. Then ultimately the department head will pull all of that together, write their letter of recommendation, and then submit that, in this case, to me, or if it's some of our units or departments that are under Dr. Dodd would go to her. And then ultimately the director will make the final decision as to whether they approve or deny that promotion. So that, I always say that's the good news, is that we end at the director level and we don't have a provost and other people that are going to go beyond us. So that is, I think, a very positive thing, because the director has a good idea of what the mission of extension is and where we're going forward. Let's talk about, before I get to your question, Larry, let's go through joint appointments now. And I'll let Sandy go through this, and then we'll go to Larry's question, okay? Because this may cover it.
Yeah,
and
this
also goes to Pat's question.
Yeah, this is again, I've noticed I'm going to make a correction on the slide, because it's the candidate's dossier, whether it's 06 or 07 is appropriate but that's all the same again. And again, this is the issue, and we predict that we will see an increasing number of joint appointments as time goes on. And so we have changed the process to make it. So what really determines is what is your majority ad-loc. So if you're 75%, 25%, 06, or vice versa for 07, then the two peer review committees will provide input. Okay, so, but the majority opinion will be based upon the majority appointment. So that committee will be recharged with writing the report of the peer review committee in regards to promotion. For the lower percent ad-loc, the other committee will also write their opinion and submit it to the majority committee. I know that sounds very confusing. So if you're 75% 06, 25% 07, the 06 peer review committee is charged with writing the overall opinion, but they incorporate the opinion of the other peer review committee in that overall statement. And the idea is to give researchers basically evaluation by research peers. And since research and extension are so tightly linked, we also want them to have the input of the extension peer review committee as they make their overall recommendation to the appropriate supervisors at that point. And it would also be vice versa. If you have a majority extension appointment, then the extension peer review committee will write the majority opinion, and they will incorporate the opinion from the peer review research group as part of their opinion. So we had to make one or the other peer review committee the majority to write the document, but then we want the input from the other committee to cover the minority appointment, if you want to put it that way. Does that make sense? I know it's a very complicated looking figure.
So and Pat, we'll let you ask the first question, but coming in, just kind of going back to what initially Pat is asking, and if I don't answer this, join in, Pat. So he's heard that within the department there, that a extension candidate is being evaluated by the research peer review committee. That is true. So that's not within the department, but the one that's across the research agency will do an evaluation of the research portion of that person's appointment. And then that report that they put together will come over to the majority, will come over to extension. The extension will incorporate that into their report. That then will go forward back to the department head. If it's the center director, that's part of that. Whoever the supervisor is. Now, just on unit leader here, really in our world, in this context, goes to those people like Stephen Green, who's the unit leader for family and community health, or Monty, that is part of 4-H, so those units outside of the departments. That's what we're thinking about when we talk about unit leaders. And so the majority would drive the boat, basically, the majority, but they would receive input from the minority peer review committee, then go to the department head, then go to the appropriate advise or and other appropriate supervisors, and then ultimately would go both Sandy and myself, who would look at it. We would confer, and then ultimately the directors will confer when it's all said and done before they make the final decision. I may have jumped the gun there, Sandy, but that's
No, that's exactly right. And again, I just want to reiterate, as far as being a candidate for promotion, the candidates focus on what's within that red oval. So all the other steps above that. So again, I just want to reemphasize, we're not changing any of the expectations and methodology at the department level in this process. This process is changing from when it's submitted to Interfolio, because due to the university changes, the departmental P&T committee doesn't see AgriLife research or AgriLife extension dossiers anymore. It goes to a peer review committee. So everything that's been changed is just the process once the dossier has been submitted to in Interfolio in the department. So all of those guidelines and everything you hear from your department, none of those are being changed or modified in any way. We're simply changing the process once your dossier is submitted.
so. I guess Pat, follow up and make sure that did that cover what's your question?
Not exactly, but let me start by saying this is an improvement, in my opinion, over what we used to do. I served on the college committee in the past, and now I'm seeing that majority research will be evaluated. The extension people don't have to evaluate the research performance of researchers.
Right.
And to me, when I was on that college committee in the old days, I didn't know what the hell I was doing evaluating the researchers that much. I was okay. But this is refreshing to see this breakdown. Now, as to my question was, what kind of people at what rank? I assume they're still all going to be full professors on the college committee, taken from our ranks to evaluate extension people. I'm going to make that assumption. Is that correct?
That is correct. We want full professors that are going to serve on the peer review committees.
So yeah, full professors ad hoc to extension for the extension peer review committee, and full professors ad hoc to research on the research peer review committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, Larry?
And Pat, I agree. I think this is actually going to be an improvement, knowing how the college P&T committee, extension and research have very complementary missions, but we do have different missions, and it's really nice to know that you're being evaluated by people that clearly understand what the missions of AgriLife research and AgriLife extension are. And so I think it's going to give a very equitable evaluation of every single candidate that comes through, which I know it's very difficult if you serve on a as you did on the college P&T committee, to be evaluating candidates that are not in your area that you're familiar with. So we're hoping this is actually going to be a very big improvement.
So Larry, you had a question.
So Sandy, to your point, that exact point, I'm wondering about the makeup of the extension committee. I mean, we have separate groups. Let's just say we have ag and natural resources, we have 4-H, we have family and community health. What if all the people on the committee are family and community health and 4-H people? I'm going to submit to you that they will not understand very well what we do in ag and natural resources. So how do we guard against that?
You bet. So
Larry, that's a great question. And again, that's part of the reason why Dan and I are re-emphasizing the importance of the position description. That is the baseline by which each candidate will be evaluated. And extension and research are incredibly broad areas. When you talk about this, the idea is that the committees are going to be large enough that, again, that's what we're assembling right now, is these committees, that they will represent all the different areas, and through conversation and discussion, understanding the specific missions of research and then the missions of extension, they will come up with a fair and equitable evaluation of all the different areas covered by an extension candidate and all the different areas covered by a research candidate. I mean, it's one of the things we're trying to do is, when you have a mixture of tenured faculty, research faculty, extension faculty, everybody comes into this with an implicit bias of what they think a candidate should be doing. But we're trying to minimize that by focusing on the position description and focusing on people that understand the mission of extension and people that understand the mission of research. And to the best of our ability, hopefully that's what the chair of the committee is going to be doing, is going to be the referee to make sure that it's a fair discussion and evaluation of each of the candidates for all the different areas that these candidates cover.
On a
Yeah,
practical side,
and I get that.
Larry, on the practical side, just so you know, no more than 2 people within a department could be on the P&T chair or P&T committee. So they will be across departments. So you won't have just strictly people that are family and community health or 4-H on there. There'll be significant people from
that's good.
So we did that. And right now, as we're looking at with a director, the majority is one person per department, the way it's looking like it's going to play out. But then also going, this is because I've been on the P&T group as well. And so I had people from biochemistry and people over in geosciences and people in other groups that were evaluating these extension dossiers. At least we have now people that know the mission of extension or in the mission, that based off of this person's job description, is this person meeting the expectations of that, and are they on the upward trajectory for improving and getting better and really developing a reputation for themselves within their field. I'm sorry, Larry, go ahead.
And I get that, and I agree with Pat. I think it's an improvement in many, many ways, but I just didn't want us to randomly assign people to the committee and have it imbalanced one way where somebody wouldn't even understand what a plant looked like. And so as long as we're going to have, fair and equal representation, I don't think there'll be a problem. So thank y'all both for explaining that.
No, good questions. We want these. That's good. All right, Sandy, back to you.
All right, this is probably what you're mostly interested in, is preparing the dossier. And again, when you go to the website, there are several appendices that are attached, and Dan will talk about those again in a bit. And so Appendix 2 covers the composition of your dossier. And again, we're emphasizing the position description as being the critical baseline. So the position description we're asking as being the first document in your dossier, because that's what a reviewer is going to see first. What are your duties and obligations? And then you'll write a 3-page summary. And again, that'll be the second document in your dossier, and that basically serves as the narrative that complements your CV. So you will be submitting a complete curriculum vitae, but this is the narrative. It's not a reiteration of, I published X number of papers, I gave so many presentations, I did this and this and this. It's where you explain how your philosophies for research, teaching, extension, service outreach, how you take your philosophies of the way you believe things should be done and translate those out into benefits and impacts at the local, state, national, and international levels. So it's basically the narrative. It fleshes out what your CV is doing. And so, when you talk about, for an example of 100% research appointment, where you don't have an official teaching representation, teaching usually involves graduate and postdoctoral mentoring, for example. So how do you believe you should what's important to you to train graduate students and postdocs? How do you go about that? Are there examples of how your students have succeeded once they've left your program, or what they're learning while they're in your program? So this is a very difficult thing to do because you only have 3 pages, and the website will actually tell you 12-point font, what the margins need to be, things like that, the mechanics of it. But really, it's how you say, I believe that This is the way it should be done. This is how I've implemented this in what I do. And this is the outcome of how this is impacting people. And so that's really a very, very important, this 3-page summary. That's the first thing I read. Basically, now I'm going to read the position description and I'm going to read the 3-page summary. That tells me who you are. Yeah, I can look at numbers. I can look at, these things all have to do with numbers, support, publications, presentations, but this tells me more about you as a person, which I think is a critical part of supporting our faculty. Now, the third part is your annotated CV. And this will be the third document, your dossier. It includes, as a standard, curriculum vitae, your demographic information, your education, how many years have you been in your current rank, where you're located, what your appointment is it 100%, is it a split appointment, things like that. And then you're going to be listing publications, you're going to be listing sources of funding, you're going to be listing whether this is commodity, industry, competitive grants, internal funding. But please include under those maybe 1 to 2 sentences why your contributions is essential. And so if you go to the next slide.
Let me make one point on that.
Oh, sure.
So this is something where put your actual appointments. Don't put down the percents that you're doing this and this and this. This is just one important point. We have gotten away from doing that. We believe that 100% extension people should do some applied research. That is one aspect of a scholarly contribution. It's not the only. There are other aspects that would count equally, and also expect to do service as well. So don't. If you're 75% extension, 25% research, that's what we're talking about. Don't put down what you think your work effort is. Because that really brings a lot of confusion to the committee if you're not careful.
Yep, that's a good point.
Can I ask a quick question?
You sure can.
Is that Katie? All right. Yes.
Yes, this is Kate. So 2 questions actually. The first one on position description. Is this going to be essentially what is on Workday?
They should be the same.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
What is on Workday should be your position description.
Okay.
Because from my standpoint, that's all I have. If I wanted to go say, well, what is Katie Lewis doing? I can go to Workday and see that. So,
okay.
So that's good. And a question that some people have, Katie, and maybe this is not what you're going, but what if my position has changed over time? And that should be reflected in this 3 impact statements, this 3-page summary, and then also reflected in the department head letter. As to, yes, this person over time has changed in their duties and this to meet the needs of the departments, and so that should be taken into consideration. So, but the current position description should be there. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
And then my second question is, I am 100% research, but I'm one of those unique individuals that has a 25% teaching appointment with Texas Tech University. And so in addition to my graduate training, can I also include my responsibilities for my teaching appointment at Texas Tech?
I'd say you should.
Okay.
I think that would.
Okay.
Again, that's part of who you are and what you do, and you have obligations and responsibilities because of that 25% appointment.
Okay.
And so you need to get credit for that.
Okay. Excellent.
However, you can look at that as actual teaching credit. It's also service, and it's also shows scholarly contributions too. I mean, it really, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, the spirit of this is to give everyone all the credit they deserve for everything they do. And we want to be able to reflect the fact if somebody comes up and they have to, and they're step in because of a gap and they suddenly take on this new responsibility, we want that to be rewarded, not to be suddenly, oh, well, they published 1 less paper this year, so we're going to penalize them for that. No, they probably published 1 less paper because they already stepped up in another area. And so we want to make sure the candidates get all the credit they can for everything that they do to help the mission. And that's the goal. I just included this because some people go, well, how do you write a 1 to 2 page sentence as an annotation? So I took a previous basically dossier and tried to sort of redact anything that might be identifying. So the authors, the title, things like that, but you can see plant cell. Here was the particular 1 to 2 page impact factor 8.2. In this article, we highlighted how blank emerged as a premier model system for studies of ecology, evolution, genetics, and genomics and so as your peer review committee is looking through the document, and this goes back, Larry, to your question about, well, what if somebody doesn't know what a plant is? Well, this is a place where the candidate actually gets to give a sentence like, the study advanced our fundamental knowledge of plant stress signaling. So you may know nothing about the topic, but you understand what the importance of the publication is. And so it gives you as a candidate, again, a little place where you can actually say, well, you may not understand what this is, but this is why it was important. I mean, I use an example that I was asked to write a section in a grant proposal that hadn't been funded for 2 years in a row. I was the 4th co-PI on the proposal, but the section I wrote actually got the grant funded. So even though I'm listed as the 4th co-PI, I wasn't the principal investigator. If I hadn't made that contribution, the grant wouldn't have been funded. So this is a way that you can emphasize how, if you're a co-PI, you're a co-author, how your contribution was critical to the success of either the manuscript or the grant or the funding application, whatever it happens to be. So I just wanted to include this as an example of an impact. This is a example of a publication table in a curriculum vitae. And I'm just gonna, I'll be honest, I looked myself up on Google Scholar. So that was just sort of my citations, H-index, I-10 index, basically. And then some of the journals that I published in over my career, and something about the impact factor, just to kind of show them. And you can glance at this and you can see the breadth of areas that people publish in, and you can see how well their publications are cited by groups. So it's just a nice visual way. And Dan, you did so much work on this part.
No, no,
turn this one.
The goal is in the old system, there were separate charts for grants and contributions for research, extension, and college. And we, Research and Extension, decided to just use a common document that allows for both you to not just do grants, but we believe there's other sources for extension, in particular, user fees, in-kind contributions. I think that's for about anybody out there. If you're using somebody else's equipment to do your research, farmer or cooperator or whatever, that's an in-kind contribution. If you're using somebody else's land, there's in-kind contributions throughout here that I think you ought to be rewarded for. And so this document allows us to capture that kind of information, where the grant came from, contribution that you came directly to you. And so this is going with, back to Sandy and I agree on this point, is that when we say directed to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you receive the dollars in your personal account. It means what you were overseeing, the part of the project that you were overseeing. There are many projects I did that I didn't have my own accounts, but I did have a responsibility specifically to one part of that project, and that was X number of dollars that were given to that part. And so you ought to put that down as being directed by you, by the candidate. Anything else on that part, Sandy?
So up in the research arena, I have received grants where I've received money for, let's say, genomic sequencing, but the money actually came through me and went to a genomic sequencing facility to actually carry out the work. So the money actually didn't come to me. It went to the sequencing facility, but I was directing the work that was being done. So in order to give people credit for that kind of contribution, I never saw a dime of it, but I was in charge of how that money was spent. So I feel that I would deserve credit for that. So that's an example for research.
So I did see Lindsay's hand went up. Lindsay.
Yep.
Yes, sorry, I was going to read off a couple of questions by Morgan Treadwell in the chat.
Okay.
Regarding extension peer review committees, will candidates know who is on the committee?
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm not. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So I'll talk to Sandy I'll let you know what we end up deciding, because I don't believe on the college level they actually do have that as public information, but we'll talk about that.
Okay. Second question, regarding the annotated CV, is this description recommended for all publications and grants?
Yes, that is something you would be by all major projects. Like if you're doing a county program, what came out of that, not necessarily you'd list the county program, but if it's a major program or a major extension publication, Sandy presented research ones, but there's extension publications that go out, talk about the contribution of that to the stakeholder that it was going to. So yes, at least the major things that you're going to work with.
Thank you.
Yeah, one of the goals is you saw when I did a sort of a publication, H factor and I-10 index, and that's I have mixed feelings about H indices, because what's more important to me is is the outputs of what you're doing reaching the intended audience. That's what's critically important. I don't care about counting up and seeing who has the highest H index. I want to know, are you reaching the audience and you're benefiting the audience? That's part of your impact. So that's where you may be doing a bulletin or something, but it's really changing. It's really making a difference to the group that you're presenting to. That's what those 1 to 2 sentences are. So you don't have to do every single thing, just where you feel that you want to highlight your contribution. And again, for many things, it's just, yes, I give X number of invited talks, and that's great, but that's also, that's part of the expectation. And so that's good to just list those. Other materials and documentation, again, we're not changing anything about what the departments require as far as documents to be included. Your department has specific guidelines that'll have the details that you need to work about. And again, that's what your mentoring committee is there for, is to help you make sure that you have all the things your specific department or unit requires in your dossier. There is the option that if COVID-19 adversely affected your ability to carry out your duties and obligations, you can include in this impact statement. It's optional, and just briefly explain how the pandemic affected your abilities to perform your duties. You may not have been able to give presentations to community members. You may not have been able to travel out in the field. You may have not been able to have students in your lab doing research for a period of time. How possibly did the pandemic affect your ability to carry out your duties? The other part is the external reviewer checklist, and you can see appendices 4 and 5. The candidate, you are in charge of your promotion. So you will submit to your department head or your associate department head, your correct supervisors, a list of potential external reviewers. And again, hopefully you're not coming up a week before you submit your dossier with these. You've been thinking about these, you've been talking about potential ones with your mentoring committee and your supervisors for all this period of time. Again, your department head or associate department head in this case develops their own list of potential reviewers. And the goal is that these need to be, quote, arm's length reviewers. So, and you can see the list, 5 years since you've collaborated or been a co-author with them. They haven't been a co-worker for 5 years. They're not a business or professional partner. They're not one of your thesis or dissertation or postdoc advisors. So again, you're thinking about conflict of interest, not a family member, including relatives. Goal is to be from a peer or aspirational institution. Now, one of the things that we also think is an improvement is we're not requiring that the external reviewers be from AAU institutions. I know there's examples. If you have people that you can use, by all means do that. But if you're very field oriented, there may not be somebody at a Cornell or some other AAU institution that really is knowledgeable enough in your field to be able to provide an unbiased review. So but we want them to be a peer aspirational institution as best we can. Now, if somebody, what that always goes in is there will be a biography, a short biography of each of your peer reviewers that will be submitted by your supervisor. And that is where it will be explained why this person is the right person to do the review. And so that's to remove any bias about somebody goes, oh, well, that's not a tier 1 research institution, so why is he or she a reviewer? But this may be the national expert in your field, and that's a really strong thing. Again, they have to hold an academic rank higher than the candidate. And candidates also can submit a do not contact list. If maybe there's somebody who you've been competing for funding or having, just disagreeing in principle with, who also works in a field related to yours, you can list that person as somebody you'd rather not be contacted. And we will honor that. We will not contact those people. Am I missing anything, Dan?
Yeah, I would add to that, just in addition to that, USDA and other government scientists, if they're part of a university, they need to be at a rank higher than yours. But there are institutions outside of a college that potentially could be reviewers, or university could be, like government agencies, could be potentially reviewers. So that's written into the diagram.
If somebody's at the International Rice Research Institute, for example, that would be an excellent person to have as an external reviewer, depending on what your field of research or extension work is.
So I think, in addition to just the charts and things that we just discussed, there are some specific things to extension and research that we have also included and are on that website. So, for example, the extension career ladder is on that. That's just specific to extension personnel. And there's some research documents as well. And, I thought it would be important for us to go through what the research extension expectations are. And so, Sandy, you helped develop the slide, so I'll let you get us started.
All right. So again, this is sort of expectations. I'm focused right now on promotion to the associate level. You can see scholarship, impact, leadership. Demonstrated independence in your scholarship. Collaborative work, of course, is the way science is done. But again, you want to emphasize your major and independent contributions to scholarship. And again, that's partly where your annotated CV will become very important. Impact. Have you meaningfully and nationally recognized made impacts in your field of research or extension? That's how do you demonstrate that? Again, leadership. Are you becoming recognized as a leader in your field of study? Are you on a strong and sustained trajectory to attain national leadership status? And are you part of a statewide or regional multi-state leadership? Do you lead a multi-state project? Do you serve as a chair of a committee for your professional society? Are you an associate editor or an editor for, demonstration of leadership? And again, the example I use is that when you're going from assistant to associate, you're demonstrating the establishment of a national reputation. Okay, so you don't have to be here, but you're establishing that national reputation, and that's why it's important. Now, when we go for promotion to full professor, again, leadership, impact, growth, scholarship, yes, that's always going to be a key indicator of performance. But do you have evidence now of recognition as a leader regionally or nationally? And what I coach people when they're going from associate to full, the slope of the line gets a little steeper. So the ideal external reviewer letter is to have somebody say, Dr. So-and-so is recognized as one of the national leaders in this area. That's if that's all they say in their external letter, that's a big positive. So is there evidence of recognition as a leader? Are you being invited to give talks at national meetings? We all present at meetings, but are you being invited to give the talk? Are you being invited to give overview talks, things like that? Impacts that have advanced the field in some manner. And again, here it's critical to define your field. whether it's research extension and what its relevance, value, and impact for your unit is, the agency, the system, the state of Texas, and the nation. How has your work impacted the field that you work in? And again, having some specific examples where you've advanced the field really helps basically support your case for going up for promotion. Research extension evaluation. Your position description, again, is key. So how have you as a candidate defined, developed, and positioned your scholarship and field of study to achieve impacts? And again, what's excellent in research extension, productivity, and impact? So there's any number of different metrics that you can use to support all of this. So that's I won't read that line by line, but okay, Dan.
So teaching, this particular section is for, again, 100% research or joint appointments, extension research, joint appointments, and this section is only here as a depository for that kind of work that you might be doing with respect to teaching, kind of unofficial teaching that you may do, such as guest lectures or student mentorship, or helping somebody with a work study, or helping with an internship program. This is just how you work with graduate students and undergraduates, committees and things like that. This is just a placeholder to put that kind of information, so it is in one place. If you're doing, it's not required to do that work unless it's something that's encouraged by your department head as kind of in their mind a service activity. The reason we have this one section to put that kind of information is because before we would have found it in the teaching section, we would have seen it in the extension section, in the service section, and the research section. So this is just kind of a home to put those places, those things that are teaching, academic, and student mentorship, where you can list those activities that you're doing as a good colleague within the department. And then, of course, we always encourage people to do service and outreach. And so that's being a good colleague, again, within the department, within external groups, such as commodity groups, for example, within an extension that you might have service towards within the department, within the agency. Also, if you're 100% research and don't have an extension part, I look to your extension work as a service activity, just like I might look to somebody that's 100% extension, that when they do their applied research, that's a research activity, but it's part of their position, it's part of the service that they do. And so in reality, as we look at it, we do expect you to have, again, these are just places to put information about what kind of activities you are doing and how you're contributing to the land grant mission as a whole. I would say that I encourage anybody that has an extension, majority extension appointments, whether you're ad hoc to extension, to go through the professional career ladder system for extension faculty. That has been updated with the new, basically, processes that we're talking about. Really no change in expectations. In fact, charts like this are exactly the same as they were in the 2020 version that we put together. So no expectations in what's expected of the people that have these positions. So this is a matrix that is within that land grant or that calendar or career ladder documents. And you'll see it says assistant professor, associate professor, and full professor. And it talks about the years before you are encouraged to go up for the next promotion. And just so you know, and I have verified this, that if you, by August 31st of 2024, if you have, at that time, have had 5 years of work put in, then right now you can go and put your application in for promotion. So it's 5 years as of the date of promotion. So when you put your packet in for promotion today, this is only an extension, and I'm sure Sandy will talk about research. But for extension, when you put your application in, which I think September 19th is the date it has to be uploaded in an Interfolio to go to the next stage, at that point, you'll be evaluated. And then by the end of the year, by January 1st, the director would have made a decision as to whether you would be promoted or not. And then that would go into effect the next fiscal year. So in reality, September 1st, 2024 is when that promotion would go into effect. So in talking with the director, and to make us all equal within extension, so program specialists, this is the same thing as for county agents, that if you, at that date of August 31st, 2024, if you have 5 years in service since your last promotion or since you took the position, then you can submit your application in this go around that's due, of course, in September of 2023. In this section, it talks about extension. Of course, if your extension ad locked, then this ought to be a high priority. Your service to the extension network is critical. What you see in these categories are what we would expect. If you're an assistant professor, and when it says assistant professor, when you go up for midterm, there's a list of things that we would expect you to be doing by the time you go to the midterm. If you desire now to be promoted to associate professor, that list that says associate professor as you go down through that, that's what you should have in place now. And if you do have those things in place, then at least something in each of these categories in place, then you're ready to go up for promotion. And again, you're going to talk very heavily with your mentoring committee, and then ultimately look to the guidance of your associate department head and department head as to whether you're ready to go up or not. And so this assistant professor is kind of what would be expected at midterm. Associate professor, what would be expected before you were promoted to that level, and professor, what you would be promoted to that level. Again, that upward trajectory that that Sandy talked about. Again, there's a teaching section. It's, if you don't have a teaching appointment, this is not necessarily applicable, but if you do, we encourage you to list those things under a academic instruction, academic teaching, student mentoring section, a service section as well. And then there's a list of all the things that we recommend that you keep track of and report in your CV. So that's the extension guidelines. And so, Sandy, I'll turn it over on the research side.
Okay, so thank you, Dan. And again, this is what's currently, if you go to the website that's listed there, and I hope Lindsay will also put that in the chat. This is what's currently revised in April of 2020. I'm emphasizing sections 1 to section 3.2 only are still relevant. Okay, the other sections beyond that talk about the process that we are modifying in response to changes at the university. But sections 1 through 3.2 continue to be important. Next slide, Dan. And again, for research, criteria for faculty rank, and my goal is to make a nice graphic like Dan has for extension out of this, but within 5 years and prior to the 6th year, associate professor, this lists, again, the things that are expected to be in place to go up for promotion. And again, in AgriLife research, you will go up prior to your 6th year. And again, after 6 years and prior to the 7th year, if you're ready, you can go up for professor. And again, this lists some of the requirements and expectations of that. Next slide, Dan. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you can just go right there and look at it. Substantial regarding research and mentoring is measured in multiple ways. Quantity, significant amount of research and mentoring, and quality of that. Quality is really important. I think it's more important than just quantity by far. And again, the next one is evaluation procedures. Again, emphasis should be on, for an AgriLife researcher, on research-related criteria. And again, the position description, and again, depending on your department you're associated with, several departments require an annual plan of work, and that's often used in the annual evaluations. So what are your accomplishments, publications, awards, invited participation, offices held, external research funding, effective relationships, and you're showing a well-planned and developed program of research that's contributed, making impacts in knowledge and benefiting society. And again, AgriLife Research just came up with a new strategic plan. If you can emphasize in your statement how your process and your program is reinforcing the goals of AgriLife research, that's a plus. That's a really good thing to do. Next slide, especially when you get up to the director level where they're very interested in this. All right.
All right, so on the teaching side, this is a question, maybe some people here that have official teaching responsibilities. So either you have a percent appointment that's teaching, or you're teaching on an overload basis. So we have visited with Dr. Klein, and she has basically agreed that we will rely on the department's evaluation of that person's teaching performance, and that will be stated in the department head letter. Now, there may be ways that within the department you make that evaluation through committees or through other people, associates, department heads, or people that are in charge of undergraduate teaching or whatever. But ultimately, we will look to the department head letter to help transmit how that person is doing and performing in the teaching area. That person will not go through the college P&T committee or the department P&T committee. They will not go through the college peer review committee. So they're not going to be evaluated at the department or on the college side for that teaching. That's those that have a minority, that are ad hoc to research or extension, have a minority teaching appointments. Then ultimately the associate directors will look at that letter and the teaching performance in relation to the overall position description of that person, and make sure that that they looks like they are performing well in all areas of their position as they make their recommendation to the director. Then ultimately the director will confer with, in this case, Dr. Klein, before making a final decision to accept or deny promotion. So now, questions.
Questions. We appreciate your patience in listening to all this, but I'm sure, again, if you have questions now, we're happy to address them, and contact either Dan or myself anytime.
Is it no longer allowable to put your dossier forward for consideration and a year earlier for associate to professor promotion?
Good question. If it's again, if the dossier is outstanding enough in consultation with your supervisors and they support that, then you as the candidate have the right to submit your dossier a year early to go up for promotion. The trade-off is that if the peer review committee and the directors decide you're this close, not quite there, you have to wait a cycle before you can resubmit for going up for full professor. So if your career is doing outstanding, we're not going to hold you back from going up from promotion early. But again, that's what your supervisor and your mentoring committee that have seen many different dossiers go forward are probably going to give you the best advice. And I just want to reemphasize, we're not changing anything, any expectations. We're simply changing the process once your dossier is submitted. So that's the major change.